Today we're going to look at how you can put an input in and change it on your output. Now in this example we've got a program here that takes your input and replaces the vowels. So if I have a simple word like cat, it replaces the vowels with a letter. Well, we could do something a bit more complex, like and so this is getting into the encryption and all of that. As on my other videos, we're going to start in Scratch, but then we're going to go to a web page. And we could have something like this. I was walking down to the shops. And then if I get time at the end, I can show you that with a bit of imagination, so let's have a look inside of Scratch, and it actually looks like there's a fair bit of code there, but we're going to break it down. Okay, for starters, all we're going to do is grab the user input, and in Scratch you've got the built-in one under sensing. When you called ask, whatever you type in there, the user's answer will be put into that. You can see whatever the user types in there, it saves it as answer. And then what I'm going to do is save that answer into a variable called input. We don't have to do this, but I'm just going to do this to try and make it as close to how we program it in the JavaScript version. So step one is simply event first. We need an event. I chose the green flag to start the whole process. And we go into sensing and we get the ask block, and then we get the user's input. Now what we're going to do is a loop. The loop is the repeat block. They suggest 10, but we may not want 10. What we want to do is we want to get this word. So if I just start with the word cat to keep it simple. Now what happens is it takes the first letter, C, and it's going to run it through the filter. And the filter is going to be set up to say if it's a vowel, we're going to change it to a number. So A is going to be 4 and so on. So we want to let out of all the letters of the alphabet, we want to let them all through except for the 5 vowels. So rather than building something for all 26 letters, we're just going to say let them all pass through, but if you're an A, E, I, O or U, well then we're going to stop that number, change it and then put it through. And so in this case we've got the word cat. C is going to pass through from the input to the output. A is going to get caught by the filter and be changed to 4, and T is going to pass through. So we need to know how many times we need to run it. For this one, we would need to run it 3 times. If every input was 3 letters, that would be fine. We're going to need to create some variables first. Go to here, create a variable. We're going to create 3 of them. So we've got input, hit OK, output, and hit OK. And the last one, letter, just helps us to perform the loop, and it seeks the number in our letters. I'll get more into that later on, but we might as well create it for now and hit OK. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the variable input to equal answer. So at the moment our code reads, when green flag clicked, ask the user for some input, and then it's going to set that input, then it's going to put that answer inside another variable called input. That way we can see what goes in and what comes out. Answer's not totally intuitive. Now we want to run the letters of the input 3 times, as we've just established. And then we're going to say what the output is. Now before we do get into any of this, we need to clear off all of our variables so that we're starting clean. So we would go, when green flag clicked, set input to 0, set output to 0, and that way you'll see over here that when you click on the green flag they're all cleared, and letter is actually going to start at 1. That one is the exception, and I'll explain why soon. Okay, so if we run our code there, we're starting clean, we get the user's input in that answer, and we're going to create a variable called input to put that answer in. And at the moment the output is 0. So if I say cat, we can see input is cat, the same as answer. Output is nothing yet. So we want the output to be cat for now, and then we want to change it to C4T. Okay, so what is it that we're going to run 3 times? So we want to run something that just grabs the first letter of this input, and then it's going to run the second letter and then the third letter. That's why 3 times. So we want to set output to be a combination of some commands. We'll go into operators, and we're going to grab join and letter of, and put that in like that. So we're going to join the output variable, which is what we're trying to create. At the moment it's nothing. Okay, now we want letter 1 of input. I'll just leave that for now. We're going to change it soon, but let's just see what happens here. So if I run this, does it grab C for the output? So what it's doing is it's saying CCC, and that's because we're running it 3 times. So we wouldn't even need to, if we took the loop out of the equation, our input is cat and our output is C. So we're on the right track. So now we want to grab the second letter. So we can't just write letter 2, letter 3. What we're going to do is, inside of this loop, we've got a variable called letter that we created before. Pop that in there, and we're going to change that by 1 each time it loops. So if we do that 3 times, what's going to happen? CAT is input, output is also CAT. So just to reiterate that, if we take that changed letter out by 1, it's only looping the first letter of the input, and it's doing it 3 times. So C, the first letter 3 times. So by changing this, it's going to grab the first letter C, and then it'll change, this will change to 2. So it'll go the second letter, which is A, and then on the third loop it'll grab the third letter, which is T. Okay, so this is what we're after. We've got an input and we've got our output is built by pulling apart the input and 1 letter at a time stringing it back together. So now we get to put in our filter. Okay, so our first filter is going to be the letter A. We're going to change it to 4, and we're just going to work with that. Once we've got that working, then we can add in the rest of the vowels. That way, if we have a problem, we can spot it early in the piece. Okay, so what we want an if-else block. And essentially we're going to say that if the letter of input is equal to A, then the output of that particular letter is going to be 4. So let's see how we build that. So we want the equals block that's going to go here. And this one grab before, letter 1 of. Now if letter of input is equal to A, if that condition is true, then run this block of code here. Otherwise, run this block of code. So in this case, what we're going to do is pull this out of here. So if the letter is not an A, like in this case, the C and the T, that won't be true, so it'll ignore that and it will just set the output to the same letter as the input. So if the letter is A, what do we want the output to be? We want the output, set output to be, it's going to be the letter 4 instead of A. So we're going to join that variable called output, which started off as nothing, and the letter 4. So if we put all of that into that loop to run 3 times, so that's the bit that's happening here. It's going to go through here. If the letter is A, then change it to 4. Otherwise, just let the letter go through. That's the first letter. So it's C, so it's just going to pass through to this block. The second time, this is going to change to 2. So the second letter of the input is A. In this case, yes, it is A. The A is going to change to 4 and then run down to this block. So it's going to have C and then A. And then T is going to come through here. It's going to bypass that filter because that condition is not true. It's going to hit this one and it'll just add it in. So let's see if this works. C8T. So the input is C8T, the output is C4T. If that's hard to see, we can see here that he said, or you said output is C4T. So we've got it working. So any A letter, so if we had a Okay, now can you see what happened here? I had a really long string that I wanted to put through, and it's worked exactly as I told it. Now this is an error, but this is a good learning opportunity. Well, what's happened is it's grabbed, so Abraham, the input is Abraham. It's grabbed the first 3. Now why 3? Why did it stop at 3? It's done exactly. It's grabbed the first one, changed the A to a 4. It's let the B pass through, it's let the R pass through, but the H, it's kind of stopped, and that's because of this. We've set 3 times. This is the problem that we're trying to solve is, how do we tell the computer how many times we want to run? If I just had a 3-letter word like 8, it works perfectly. But if I've got a 4-letter word, it stops there. So we need some flexibility here. So we need it to run for what's called the length property. So whatever the input is, the length of the input. so if the input is 3 letters long, it will run 3 times. If the input is 20 letters long, it'll run 20 times, and that's how we define it. So if we go into here, there's length of, and we want length of input. So now, if I put in apple, it's more than 3. This code loops for the A, sorry, the length of the input in this case is 5, so it's going to run 5 times. It gets the first one, A, changes that to 2, checks the second one, lets the P fall through, lets the second P fall through the filter, L and E. It works fine. Okay, so good milestone. So what I would like you to do now is to stop this video, get this working as well as this works, and now that you've got the first filter, the A, we need to repeat that filter for E, I, O and U. And what we want to do is E is going to replace with the letter 3, I is going to be replaced with 1, O is going to replace with 0, and U, we're going to replace that with, I'll show you what this looks like. Up on the top right hand side, if you hit underneath your delete key, if you hit the shift, you'll get a vertical line, and then you can hit the underscore and vertical line again, and that's what we can replace the U with. Okay, so the clue is, or the trick I should say, is this line here. This needs to come out because we need to put the second filter into the else block. So the E block will look like this. If the letter input of E, and set the output to the letter 3, and then the next one. So I'm just going to assume that you have stopped the video and you've come back to get the answers. If the input is I, then replace it with 1. If the input is O, replace it with 0, and if it's U, then replace it with that quirky thing I just showed you before. And this is where you can say otherwise, let everything else pass through and go to the output. Okay, so now all of these 5 filters need to go into here, as well as the changed letter by 1. Okay, so let's try something ambitious and see. Okay, so that's working pretty well. So what we want to do now is untick these variables. Sensing. Say fruit salad, yummy, yummy. Oh. Okay, so our vowel replacer, which leads on to encryption, is working in Scratch. We've got the concept. Let's just do one closing bit of revision. So we started with an event handler to trigger the program off. We've created our 3 variables and we've set them all to nothing except for the letter. We want it to be 1 because it's going to grab the first letter. We get the user's input, which is stored in this answer variable. And we're going to put that answer variable into our own variable called input. And then we tested to see that if the output was going to be the same as the input, and then we created loops. So we put this part into a loop. Now, how many times? The answer is the length of the input. So if somebody types in a 10-letter word, then it loops 10 times. If somebody inputs a 3-letter word, it runs 3 times. That's all we need. Okay, and then we needed to change, this has to be part of the loop as well. So we got the input to produce the output without any filters at this point. Then we created the first filter for the letter A to change it to 4. And then we got the filter for E, I, O, and U. And for anything else that's not a vowel, it's going to go straight to the output. And we need to change this letter by 1, still has to run. Okay, so that's the Scratch version working. Okay, so now we're going to build the same application in JavaScript. So Google W3 School, HTML tutorial, and scroll down to the try it yourself. Now we're only going to use this for a little part. We just want to get a result, and then we're going to take it away and save it to our desktop. The inherent problem with this here is that if you hit refresh, you lose everything, and it's very intuitive to hit refresh because we're so used to updating data with web pages. So I only just want to get started with this, get a result, make sure everything's working, and then we're going to save it to a text editor, which we save as a HTML document. I hope you've got some experience with this, but if not, I will break it down as much as I can. Okay, so the left-hand side is our input, the right-hand side is our output. So we can see this text here has a formatting of H1, it looks like this, and this text here has a formatting of P for paragraph. If we change this to the same formatting as the top one and hit run, our output is going to be different. Okay, now that we've got that established, let's delete those 2 lines, separate the body section because that's all we're going to be working on, and hit run again. So now we've got a blank canvas. We're writing a script, so we need to open the script and close the script. Now, if we look at the Scratch side, we started with 3 variables. In JavaScript, we're only going to need 2. Variable input equals 2 quotes for now and a semicolon to finish. Variable output equals 2 quotes and a semicolon to finish. To get the ask, we use something called prompt. And if we just run that, you get the pop-up. So to get the same words we want here inside the brackets, two quotes to say it's a string of text, letting the computer know what data type. You're not using a number, you're using a string of text. Say something, and I will replace the vowels. So that says that there, and we can put in cat, but nothing will happen yet. Okay, so what we want the input to be is this. So let's cut that out of there and say variable input equals prompt. Now we have no way of seeing what the variable input is yet. So like in Scratch, we need something to output it. So we're going to use document as in a document. Okay, then dot write, and we want to put in input. Okay, so whatever we type in there is now the input, and we can see that at the moment what we write to the document is the input. If we write output, we would get what's in this. At the moment it's nothing, and if we just as a test put in cat as the output, whatever we write in here doesn't matter because it's going to display the output. So at the moment we're keeping the output as nothing. Okay, and I'm just going to clear that out for now until we're sure what we want to output. Then we ran a loop. Loops in JavaScript is a topic on its own. I encourage you to find out more about these. But if you think about what we did in Scratch, in JavaScript we wrote for. We have this variable now, assign it a value of 0. It could be anything, but I is like a standard convention, so you might as well just run with it. Now, as long as this value is less than the length of the input, like we did in Scratch. So if we write the word cat for the input, it will run 3 times. Then increment that value with the 2 pluses. Now, what we want is 2 curly braces, come back 1, hit enter twice, and in here is the code that will run. So that essentially gets us this far. So we've got our inputs, we've got our prompt is stored, we've got our loop, and it loops for the length of the input, and it increments by 1, and it writes to the output. Okay, so we could do just a little bit of testing. So we want output to equal input. Now that line on its own doesn't need the loop. If we took out the loop and just wrote that, well then whatever is in input will become output. But that's not what we want to do. We want to grab the input, pull it apart, and put it back together and change the vowels. So what we want to do is, well, let's do this. Just bear with me. If we write the output. Okay, so what it's done there, we've written in cat, and it's output t, which is different from what we've encountered before. So it actually has run each loop, but it's just gone on top of each other. So what we want to do is output equals output plus the input letter. This here signifies this the first letter of the input, and then the second time loop, it will be the second letter. So now we get the result. So now we know that output is created by the input, pulling it apart and putting it back together. Now there's also a little bit of shorthand here. Instead of saying output equals output plus input, if we write output plus equals, that does the same thing. I'll just test it with dog. Okay, so that was this part here. That's where we're up to. So then we had our filters. This is filter change A to 4, E to 3, and so on. So to do the A filter, if the letter of input, not the whole word, is equal to A. Okay, now on equals, a single equals is just assigning a value, it's not actually equaling. 2 equals will perform as an equal, but it's a little bit loose in that it will allow you to equal strings and numbers, like different data types, and sometimes you want this firm restriction. In this case, you only want data types to add together. This is a bigger issue than I'd probably need to go into here. But we've got 3 equals. So if the letter input is equal to A, then do something. So curly braces back 1, double enter. What we want to do is output is equal to output plus 4, semicolon. Let's run this. So, okay, unexpected result there. And that is because I put this line here up the top. So let's take that out and put it down there. Okay, what it is the else. I haven't done the else part. So if that equals that, then otherwise just fall through. So we've got our for loop, we've got our first if, and then I forgot the else, but we've got the else now. How do we do the E filter? So we would say else, we can copy all of this, if the input is equal to E, then we want the output to be 3, otherwise fall through. We have this working, so what I want to do now is I want to copy all of this and get it out of W3 School before I refresh and lose everything. If we've got some experience with doing this, then just fast forward a little bit. But what we're after is a text editor. For Mac, I've got Text Wrangler. You may have to actually install this, or there might be another one. I don't actually recall. In Windows, you'll need Notepad, and if you can be bothered, get Notepad++ and install that. When we open this up, let's go File, New. Paste all of this here. Now go File, Save As. Now save it to a folder that you want. So I'm going to call it Vowel, and very important is the extension. Mine's got HTML by default. It may say TXT, which is just a text file that's nothing. You want it to be HTML, which is hypertext markup language that lets it know that you're creating a web application. And now it's a web application. Input is Apple. Output is 4pull3. That's how you pronounce it. We've put in filter A, and this was our key else statement there. So we've put in filter A, and filter E was in the else part. Now we want to put in filter I, O, and U. I, O, and U, and otherwise fall through if you're a consonant, and all of that will go into the loop. Okay, and if you've not much experience with creating your own web applications, any change you do in your text editor, you have to save first before you'll see any update. So you've got to go File, Save, then refresh, Okay, so another milestone is reached. We've created a very basic web application. So if you wanted to leave it there, then by all means, stop here and pat yourself on the back. I'm going to continue the video just a little bit more to just do some styling. So the first style that we're going to do is up in the head section. So this is called CSS. So we want to style, close the style, and we want to target the body attribute, open and close brackets. So color. Background color, colon, font family, and text align. So the color that we want is 6 for the red attribute, 5 for the green attribute, and 4 for the blue attribute. Hope that made some sense. But if not, just go 665544. Okay, so now we've got this tanny background color. So from there, you could go into your body, heading 1, vowel replacer, close H1, and so just the few little lines there, it just gives you a bit more color and flavor to your application. At the start of the video, I did promise to show you how to do the matrix rain effect. Disclaimer, I didn't actually write that. I grabbed somebody else's code. And given how long it's taken me to explain how I got this far, I can't really go into too much detail. But find this in here, Arun Kumar. Okay, and you might be able to follow his. You don't have to. This is up to you if you want to go into all of this. But all I did was said, okay, where's he written the full code? Is here, and so you can work out. Okay, the head section, you need to add in the jQuery plugin. You will need to do that. Absolutely, as it doesn't work without that. In the body section, this is the author. So I would put in that part. The script all goes into the body section of your application. Okay, playing the audio. I ended up on my one is just locating the audio of the matrix and putting that in the same folder and pointing to it. You can see over here I've got matrix audio in the same folder and I pointed to it. So that's sort of up to you. I forget what he had included. This is probably about as best as I can explain it without taking up too much time. Have a go. I hope that works for you. At any rate, let's think about what we've done. We've started in Scratch. We've created this vowel changing thing. Then we've gone into JavaScript. We're able to get the same effect. We used a few lines of CSS code to bring that text into the middle, change the background color, make it just look a bit more enticing. And if you've got the tenacity and the know-how, well, then you can do the matrix style. effect on it.